I am going to keep my voice steady while I say this, but if you hear the way my breath keeps catching, that is not a microphone issue. That is me remembering the sound the bus made when it pulled up out of the dark and opened its doors for me. There was no one else at the stop, just the sodium light buzzing overhead and a thin fog shivering off the asphalt. I had missed the last train. My phone screen was a smear of fingerprints and low battery, and I told myself it would be fine, because a bus always comes if you wait long enough. That night one did. The sign above the windshield glowed a tired orange. Route 117, terminal stop. The doors sighed like something relieved to breathe. I climbed in, and I swear this to you, I felt the temperature drop as I crossed the rubber threshold, like stepping from a humid summer night into a walk-in freezer. I did not think about that then. I thought about getting home, about peeling off my shoes and letting the television talk at me while I ate whatever was left in my fridge. The driver did not speak. He sat with both hands on the wheel, black cap pulled down low, face a dim silhouette reflected in the glass. I touched my card to the reader. It beeped. I nodded like he'd done me a favor and took a seat halfway back. It smelled faintly of disinfectant and something older, like the dust you find in library stacks no one visits anymore. 2 rows up on the right, an old woman held a paper ticket in a gloved hand, as if she didn't trust anything that glowed. Across from her, a child kicked his legs gently, shoes not reaching the floor. He had a backpack with a reflective stripe that caught the aisle light and flashed with every sway. I texted my friend, caught a bus, home by 1:40. A small white bubble pulsed on my screen for a moment, as if a reply was forming, then disappeared. I put the phone face down on my thigh and watched through the window as the stop slid away and the street bent to lead us out of town. A comfort came over me. Motion does that sometimes. The hum of tires and the soft whir of the air system, the rise and fall of the bus like breathing, streetlights thinned, storefronts turned to warehouses, the kind with chain-link fences and heavy locks. A billboard rose out of the dark with a smiling family on it, the kind of smile that looks like the end of a commercial, and then it was gone behind us. I did not notice it was already the second time I had seen that family. The first disturbance was small. The bus's light above me flickered. One thin blink, the kind of blink a camera does when it takes a picture with no flash. The child looked up at it. He didn't stop kicking his legs. The old woman held her ticket a little tighter and glanced at the driver with quick, bird-like eyes. He did not move. No head turn. No catch of breath. Just the wheel in the road. We passed a gas station, the kind with one pump working and one pump taped off with a fluttering sign. I could read the faded brand name on the awning and thought, funny, I thought they closed those years ago. We passed the gas station and I sat back. The bus took a gentle curve. Ahead was another billboard with a dentist pointing into a mouth that showed more gums than teeth. We rolled under it, emerged on the other side, and there the gas station was again. Same tape on the same pump, flapping like a tattered flag. It is easy to tell yourself you are tired. That is what I told myself. Roads loop. There are circles out there. Even the moon gets lost sometimes. I checked my phone. 1:40 in the morning, exactly. The way a microwave clock freezes when the power cuts out. I pressed the side button, turned it off and on. 1:40. The small bubble did not return. I leaned into the aisle so I could see the driver better. "Sir," I said, just enough volume to carry without sounding like a problem. He did not angle his head or shift his shoulders. The brim of his cap was a line. The road was a tunnel of gray. I sat back and laughed to myself. It came out dry. I thought of the time at work when the timekeeping software looped and paid us the same hour 3 times, and how we joked that maybe the building was stuck in a corner of the universe. It felt like that, like a computer loop with a sound file too quiet to hear. The child had stopped kicking. I hadn't noticed when. He was looking out the window. His mouth was open, not in fear exactly, but in something like disappointment. The old woman's ticket trembled slightly in her hand. When she saw me notice, she lifted her chin and tried to still it, as if she refused to be seen shaking. "Can you drop me at Pine and River?" I asked the driver. He did not nod. He did not tap the brakes. The bus's indicator lights did not tick. We slid along another curve and the road made the sound of rubber crossing a seam. At the back of the bus, someone shifted. A soft scrape of fabric on vinyl, and I realized there were more people on board than I had counted at the stop. A pair of teens who had each other's sleeves twisted in their hands. A man in a suit with his shoes off and his socks white in the low light. A woman with a sleeping toddler pressed to her chest the way you hold a warm loaf from the oven. When you want to believe something simple, your brain makes it straightforward. I decided we were on a detour. The driver was avoiding construction. That was the story I lifted to my tongue to calm whatever part of me had already noticed that the darkness outside was the same darkness, repeating. I tried the stop cord. It hung loose, the red sheath soft with age. I gave it an easy pull, and it came off in my hand like a dead vine. I realized then that I had not heard the ding in a long time. I looked up, and the square where the stop requested light would have glowed was a dull rectangle of plastic, unlit and a little scuffed, as if 1,000 fingers had touched it and the oil of them had become a film. The child spoke first. "We passed that one already," he said, pointing with a small finger that had a bandage wrapped around it, the kind printed with stars. The old woman did not look at him. "We passed what, sweetheart?" she said, in a voice that sounded like the memory of a lullaby. He pointed at the billboard we were gliding under, the smiling family. I saw them again, all of them angled just slightly too stiffly, eyes too wide to be casual. The father's tie was the shade of blue you get when you try to make a sky with markers and go too heavy at the horizon. I stood up. I told myself I would keep my voice easy because nothing is solved by being the loud one at midnight. I walked to the front, feeling the soft bounce in the floor. "Sir," I said again. He did not answer. The cap's brim cut a line between him and us. Up close, there was a detail that hadn't been visible from my seat. The mirror, the big flat rectangle that lets drivers see who is coming down the aisle, had been tilted up toward the ceiling, as if to keep himself from seeing any of us. I said "sir" and reached, not for him, but for the pole that ran across the top of the steps. It was cold with the cold you store inside a freezer. He twitched once, then went still. The wheel did not shift. The lines on the road held us like rails. "He can't hear you," the old woman said. I looked back at her, and she met my eyes. She had the delicate features of someone who had been beautiful in a way that frightened men when she was young. "Not his job anymore," she added, and she lifted her ticket as if to prove she had paid for this anyway. The paper was old stock, the kind printers used when my father was young. The ink was the kind that rubs off on your finger when you touch it. Her gloved thumb had a dark stain where she had gripped the date. The bus moved like a boat over a lake with no wind. The child stood in his seat and watched the window with the patience of someone who knows the shape of a bad dream. I tried the door lever. It gave me a little and then stopped with a quiet thud, as if a hand on the other side had pressed it back. I felt my heart kick hard in my chest. That is not a metaphor. There is a moment when your body knows before your mind gives permission. I looked down the aisle and counted faces. More than when I had boarded, I do not know when some of them had joined us. There was a line of dirt at the edge of the floor where a mop had never reached. The ceiling's thin vents whispered a steady stream of air that carried no smell. I walked back to my seat because I needed the gesture of sitting to convince myself I still had choices. The teen pair had fallen asleep with their heads tilted toward each other, but never touching. The man in the suit had closed his eyes and laced his fingers across his stomach. Wedding band catching a faint glint. The mother with the toddler had let her eyes drift open. She looked at me for a long time. Her gaze was not a plea. It was a question that would not be spoken aloud. "Are you going to try, or have you already given up?" I said, "This is a loop." I did not mean to say it aloud. The old woman nodded once. "It will keep us on until it wants something it has not yet gotten," she said. The words were clear, but the diction belonged to a time when people did not waste breath on extras. The child sat down, face bright with the uncomplicated honesty of kids. "My dad says if you miss your stop, you can get off at the next one and ask the driver to go back," he said. "That is a good plan," I told him. The old woman smiled a small, sad smile as if I had told a joke about the dead. At 1:40 a.m. exactly, my phone buzzed and I leapt like an animal that hears a twig snap. The screen bloomed with a message. "Where are you?" It was from my friend. I typed fast. "Bus is weird. Keeps passing the same place. Driver not stopping." If I had been the kind of person who uses humor, I might have said a ghost bus LOL because people are braver when there is laughter in their teeth. I wrote none of that. I hit send. The typing bubble appeared. It faded, appeared, faded. Then the message arrived. "Get off." It was the kind of practical command my friend always gave when I rambled. I stood up and moved to the door again. The lever was warm under my palm now, like it had been touched by someone living. I used both hands and pulled. The doors sighed. They parted 2 inches. A seam of night slid in, the kind of pure night you only get far from town, where insects play their music and the air has no city taste. The bus did not stop. I wedged my shoulder in the gap and pushed. The wind should have slammed at my face, but we were in a quiet pocket, like the air itself had been told to behave. The asphalt below was a moving ribbon, faster than I had thought. For a moment, the fear was simple. It was the fear of falling. The old woman said, "That is not wise in the tone you use when your child reaches toward a stove." And yet she did not stand to stop me. I decided to risk the clean pain of a fall, rather than the slow realization that I was a passenger long enough to forget my own name. I counted to 3 because counting makes things real. On 1, the door nudged wider as if it had been waiting for my rhythm. On 2, the child gasped a soft, small sound. On 3, I jumped. There is a way the road kisses you when you meet it at speed. It is not all at once. It is a rough handshake that becomes a grab. My shoulder rolled, then my hip, then my knee. The sound that came out of me was a wordless bark. I lay with my face in the grit and the scent of oil in my nose, and the sharp stars of roadside pebbles under my palm. Behind me, the bus's lights spread long, and it hummed away as smooth as a thought. Relief is a flavor. It tastes like water when you did not know your throat was dry. It tastes like the moment a fever breaks and you realize the air is friendly again. My relief spread so fast it made me dizzy. I laughed. The laugh startled me. I stood, knees shaking, and raised my arm to wave at nothing. Some instinct that wanted to prove to a witness that I had made it. The highway was empty in both directions. I looked down, and there was my phone on the shoulder, face up, uncracked. The universe had decided to be kind for a second. I picked it up. 1:40 a.m. The battery's still at 20%. I typed, I jumped off. I am on the road. I looked up and typed out loud to the night, I am on the road. The horn reached me from behind like a memory catching up. It was not loud enough to hurt. It was gentle the way a parent calls you in from play. I turned. The bus approached with the same calm it had left with. The doors were open. The interior light cast a soft oblong on the pavement that showed every floating speck of dust like snow in a theater beam. The old woman stood on the first step like a hostess. "You forgot your ticket," she said, and lifted her gloved hand, palm inward, showing the thin paper rectangle. Her eyes did not accuse. They invited. I stopped breathing. The bus rolled to a pace that matched my pulse and did not slow further. The driver did not look at me. The child's face peered out from a window, pressed too close to the glass, so his nose made a soft circle fog. The mother rocked the toddler with a movement that looked practiced in other rooms. The man in the suit had turned his head and was watching without expression. My feet shifted backward on their own. The bus's open door passed me, and then the vehicle was beyond me, and the soft sound of its engine dissolved into the night, leaving me alone with the chirr of unseen insects and my breath scraping the back of my throat. I know a test when I see one. I also know a lure. I walked. The asphalt had the chalky look of roads far from cities. My shoulder ached where I had rolled. The stars were a spill of cold salt across the sky. If I could reach a crossroad, I told myself, there would be a farmhouse. If I could reach a farmhouse, there would be a porch light, a knock, a phone call to a sheriff's office where the night desk man would say, "Son, where are you?" And I would say, "I am en route." And I realized I did not know the number, and that I had not seen a green road sign in a long time, and that the night was not bending the way nights bend near town. It was straight and flat and held together by something that did not love me. After 10 minutes, and I am guessing at that, because the clock on my phone was still caught like a breath, the bus's horn came from ahead. Not behind, ahead. A curve in the road hit its body, and then it was there, coming toward me in the same single lane, because there was only one lane in each direction and no shoulder to speak of. It slid by without wind. Its doors were open again, and the old woman smiled that small, sad smile and lifted the ticket like a promise. Her lips formed the words, "You forgot your ticket," and I heard it without hearing it, like something you remember from a dream you had as a child. I mean this literally. I was not aware that my feet had turned until I saw the long fold of my shadow swinging. I felt the tug of the open door like a hand on my coat sleeve, and I forced myself to step back, to let it pass, to watch the backlights slide away. Something in me, that animal that hears the twig, warned that if I set foot inside without deciding to, the decision would be made for me, and it would not be mine again. After the third pass, I ran. I ran on the edge of the road in the thin gravel, stones popping under my soles. I am not a runner. My breath burned and my ankle rolled once with a sharp slice of pain, and I thought of stories of highways at the end of the world. And it occurred to me then that every story begins as a man telling himself he is in a story, and that is how he knows he can survive. I told myself I could survive. I promised myself I would not get on. I promised the child in the window. That made me slow. I looked back. There was no bus. The night was a deep and constant thing. My chest heaved, my hands on my knees, and the taste of iron rose in my mouth. I stood, I walked. I told myself to count steps. 100 and then another 100. When I reached 300, I thought I heard water. It was the soft hush of a creek under a culvert. I leaned on the rail and bent to look. The water was there, dark and calm, moving just enough to catch the weak light of the stars. I held my breath because it smelled clean, and clean felt like home. When I raised my head, the bus was parked beside me. No engine noise. No headlight wash announced it. It was simply posted there the way a thought appears when you are tired. The doors were not open this time. The windows looked asleep. I reached out and touched the side. The metal had the cool of a coin. I pressed my palm flat and felt not heat, not cold, but a faint vibration like a cat's purr when it sits on your knees and decides you will stay where you are. I stepped back. "I am not coming," I told it. My voice sounded small beside the creek. The creek did not care. It went about its work of smoothing rocks. The first disappearance happened without a sound. The bus's doors opened half the width they had for me, then closed. A shape that had not been there now sat at the front of the aisle. A man in a heavy coat, wet as if he had been caught in a storm. Water dripped from his cuffs and vanished as it touched the floor. He lifted his eyes and looked right at me, through the glass, with the resigned look of someone who missed the last train and took what life offered after that. He did not ask me to help him. He did not ask me to come. He just looked, and then he turned his head toward the back, as if listening to a roll call. I wondered which of us he had replaced. I walked away. I walked until my feet were numb. The bus followed me without moving, appearing at the edge of whichever thought I held longest. I let the thought go. I let them all go. I walked with an empty head and balanced on the white line and counted the steps between cracks. When I looked up again, there was a billboard standing in the field to my left. I recognized the dentist before I recognized his smile. He was pointing into the same mouth with the same two wide gums. I was nowhere. That was the shape of it, nowhere in 140 forever. I do not know when I made the decision to get back on. I would like to tell you that it was heroism, that I had chosen to go in to pull the child out. The truth is smaller and heavier. It was cold, I was tired. Exhaustion has a way of choosing for you. The bus appeared with its doors open and its warm cave of interior light. And I thought about floors and walls and the feeling of a seat under my legs, and I stepped up. The old woman watched me with the soft pity reserved for people who have discovered a trap exactly 1 second too late. I took my seat. The child was there. two rows up, his bandaged finger tapping the window once, like a code no one had taught him. The driver's cap did not shift. The bus sighed and the air vents whispered, and the road took us in. If you have ever had a dream you could not wake from even when you knew you were dreaming, you know the shape of what happened next. The loop held, the scenery repeated, but the people changed. The man in the suit was gone. In his place, a young woman in scrubs sat with her hands folded, knuckles white, as if to keep them from reaching for what they had learned to fix. The teen pair were still asleep, but now they looked older, like the light had aged them. The old woman's ticket had a fresh smudge. When she saw me looking, she said, "It takes what it must," as if she would have said, "The weather takes what the earth owes it." The child turned and looked at me, and I saw the shine of water in his eyes that he had refused to let fall. "What is it?" I asked the old woman, because naming sometimes makes a thing smaller. She touched her gloved fingertips together. "I have called it different names," she said. None of them answered. "Years ago," she added, "I thought it was a warning made of road and light, a reminder for those who forgot to be gentle. I thought if I found the right exit, I could leave. I had this ticket then." She lifted it. "It is a promise," she said, "to go on and to keep going." She smiled again, and I saw that the smile did not reach her eyes because it did not need to. Her eyes had been watching for so long they had learned to hold steady without help. I tried to sleep. The moment my eyes closed, the engine hum rose half a tone, and I was suddenly sure that if I slept, I would wake up with a new name that was not mine. I sat up. My neck hurt. My shoulder throbbed where I had met the road. My phone lay on my thigh like a beached fish. I pressed the button. 1:40 a.m., I typed to my friend. I got back on. I do not know why. The typing bubble did not appear. A minute later, a message blinked into being. "Do not let it close the doors with you inside. Do not look at the driver's face." My breath went shallow. I had never told my friend about the driver's face. The old woman's ticket crackled softly as she folded it and unfolded it, folded it and unfolded it, the way anxious hands do. The child's bandaged finger tapped the glass again. He had stopped kicking his legs entirely. I realized he must have fallen asleep earlier, because he was young, and young people need sleep even when the universe is busy. The next disturbance was sound. Under the engine hum, there was a whisper that did not come from mechanical things. It was a rhythmic murmur like the noise crowds make when they watch something important happen to someone else. It started so low I thought it was static. It rose until the vowels were almost words. I could not make them out, and maybe that was grace. The mother with the toddler shifted in her seat as if to rise, as if to leave, and when she turned her head, I could see her cheeks were wet. The toddler slept still. The old woman said, "Do not answer it." My mouth had already opened. At some point, I decided to try the driver again, maybe because my friend's message warned me against it. Maybe because warnings are invitations when you have been told you cannot leave. I stood and moved to the front and arranged my face into a smile that said, "I know this is hard for all of us, but people are waiting for me, and the kindness of strangers is how the world turns." I reached the partition and laid my hand on the pole, and something in the air tasted metallic, like how a thunderstorm charges the world before it breaks. I said, "Sir," and because my friend had told me not to look at his face, I looked at it. You have had the experience of turning a corner in your home and seeing a coat on a chair and thinking a person is sitting there. There is that jolt, small and clean, when your brain corrects itself. The driver's face did not offer my brain the courtesy of correction. It was a face, and it was not. The brim of the cap cast a shadow that seemed to go deeper than the low light allowed. In the dark beneath, where eyes should have caught a glint, there was an even black that made thought slide. The line of the nose was a suggestion. The mouth was a crease in a cloth someone had ironed too many times. What I felt was not fear of attack. It was the fear of recognition. I had the unshakable sensation that if I could have seen it well, I would have seen my own features worn down by a long road. I looked away so fast the world tilted. I walked back to my seat with the focus of someone balancing a glass of water on his head. The bus exhaled. The lights dimmed 1 degree. The whisper under the engine rose a fraction. The creek's scent carried through the vents, though the creek itself was behind us now, or ahead of us, or beside us, in a place that does not care about those words. I closed my eyes and saw the driver's almost mouth, and the way it had looked like a seam. Time did not pass in the way I grew up trusting. Passengers changed again. The teens vanished. Their seats held only the soft impression of where bodies had been. In their place, a man in work overalls appeared, big hands gone soft at the edges. He stared ahead as if expecting a supervisor to give him a task. The suit man was back, but he was older now, or younger, or he had never left. The mother held the toddler with the ferocity of a person who knows which of the world's hands are cold. The old woman's ticket had torn a little at one corner. She smoothed it with a gloved finger, her touch gentle even with paper that would not heal. It is strange what your mind does to keep you human. I tried to remember the layout of my apartment, the color of my couch, the way the morning light comes through the blinds and makes a ladder on the far wall. I whispered my own name. It sounded like a word in a language I had studied once but could not speak. The child turned around and watched my mouth make the shapes. Then he whispered it back to me with perfect clarity, and that steadied me. "Thank you," I said. He nodded once, solemn as a guard. At some point, the bus stopped. The brakes hissed softly. The engine kept humming. I looked out and saw through the glass a shape in the dark that suggested a building. It could have been a rest stop. It could have been a chapel. The doors did not open. The driver did not move. The old woman's head tipped as if she were listening to a far radio that sometimes gave the weather. "This is where it pretends," she said. "Pretends what?" I asked. "That we have a choice," she said. She tucked the ticket into her sleeve and stood. The movement was fluid and calm. The child stood too. I stood because when the people around you stand, your legs follow. The doors opened. The air that came in did not have temperature. It had texture. It was like stepping into a memory. We did not leave. We only looked. The building outside had no signs. Its windows were dark. The space between us, and it was small, but it stretched as my eyes tried to cross it. The whisper under the engine sharpened like a needle tested on the pad of a finger. Somewhere far off, another horn sounded. Not the bus. Higher, like a long-ago train. The old woman said, "Not tonight," in a firm, almost affectionate tone, and the doors closed with a soft sound, as if they obeyed her out of habit. I realized then that she had been here longer than she had breath for. I realized then that if anyone would know what must not be done, it would be her. "How long?" I asked without asking what I was asking. "Long enough," she said. She did not look at me. Her eyes were on the child, who had sat back down and was tracing the outline of the reflective stripe on his backpack with one finger. She said, "Name your home to yourself until your teeth can say it in their sleep." I did. I named my street in the shape of the crack in the sidewalk outside my building and the sound the radiator made when it wanted to be a friend. I named my favorite mug. I named the books in the stack beside my bed. I named the carelessness of my jacket over the chair. I named the way my keys make a soft chime when they hang from the hook. I named the smell of the hallway. I named the exact color of the sky the morning after it rains. At one point, I asked the old woman if there was any way to pay. Money is what we grow up using to measure possibility. She shook her head, amused and sad. "This is not a debt," she said. "It is a direction." "Which way?" I asked. "Forward," she said, and lifted the ticket again, as if that answered everything. When the panic returned, it did not arrive as terror. It arrived as the knowledge that the child had stopped blinking. He was staring so hard at the window that his eyes were watering, and he did not lift a hand to wipe them. He whispered my name again. I had not told him it was mine more than once. He said, "Do not fall asleep," and I heard in his voice the echo of a warning a parent gave him often in a house where the power sometimes went out. I told the old woman I would try the doors again, not because I believed, but because action has weight. She nodded. When I reached the front, the driver's head was slightly turned, as if, and I do not know how else to put this, as if he were listening without ears. I pressed the lever. The doors parted. The night came in. It smelled for a flicker like cut grass after rain. And then it smelled like a school hallway. And then it smelled like my father's old car when the heater was on in winter. It was doing something to me that felt like remembering on purpose. I stepped back and the doors closed. My fingers left sweat on the metal. There was a moment, I think it was a moment, when the whisper under the engine resolved into words. They were not a language I understood, but they were arranged like a sentence with a period at the end. The bus's lights gray dimmed again. The old woman said, "It is almost done with us." The child said, "I do not want to be done." The mother held the toddler tighter and rocked, and the motion made me want to cry because it was the purest answer I had seen to anything. The crash footage arrived without a screen. I do not know how else to say it. It did not play on glass. It slid into the space in front of us like light does when it forgets how to bounce. For a fraction, the road ahead was not a road but a night years earlier. Another bus, another set of faces, a curve taken too fast or too late or never taken at all, a railing bent, a shoulder torn. That is all the detail I will give. YouTube is a place where careful words keep us from turning horror into spectacle. I felt the old woman's gloved hand touch my sleeve with the weight of a moth. She said, "That is what they look at to explain," as if somewhere men with clipboards had tried to make a story in daylight of what we were moving through. The bus made a small sound like a sigh after crying. The road was a road again. The billboard with the smiling family waited patiently for their turn to be seen. My phone vibrated. I looked down. A message, a new one, as if time had remembered me. It said, "If you pass the creek again, get off there." I raised my head and saw the culvert. The bus slowed half a breath. I do not think it was mercy. I think it was the rhythm of a loop offering the same steps. I stood. The old woman shook her head once, not to stop me, but to mark that this would be mine to try. The child stood too, but I held out my hand, palm down. Small gesture. "Stay." He stayed. I pressed the lever. The doors opened, and I felt the clean water smell like a hand on my chest. I jumped. The bus held me in its light a moment longer than it had the first time, as if memorizing the shape of me this time properly. I hit the gravel, rolled into grass, came up with a smear of damp on my cheek that tasted like the ground, and all the things that had fallen into it before me. I scrambled to my feet. The bus had not moved. The doors were open. The old woman stood, the ticket in her hand. Her smile did not change. She did not speak. The child had his hand pressed to the glass, palm flat, as if we could exchange warmth through it. I shook my head. I waved once, the way you wave at a family at a train station when you do not know if you will see them again. The bus closed its doors. The engine sound softened and faded and left me with water. I climbed down the embankment to the creek and stepped onto the rocks. In the creek's reflection, the sky was generous with stars. I crouched and let my fingers touch the surface. It was cold in a way that had the rightness of a thing doing its job. My phone buzzed again. "Where are you?" I typed by the light of the screen. "Creek." I jumped. I think it let me. I do not think it let me," came the reply. "I think it wants you to tell someone. I think you need to say it out loud. So I am saying it. I am saying it into this microphone in a room that smells like dust and the ghost of coffee. I am saying it because there is a bus that comes at night when you miss the last train or the last kindness. And it looks like any other bus until you feel the air on your cheek change and the clock on your phone forgets to be a clock. I am saying it because if you get on, it will ask you nothing and take you everywhere you have already been until you do not mind. I am saying it because on that bus there is an old woman who has learned patience from the way paper breaks, and a child whose bandaged finger taps the glass like a name, and a driver whose face is a seam that turns into yours if you look too long. I walked along the creek until the ground gave up its slope and became field. A barbed wire fence met me, and I followed it until I found where someone had bent it to make a place to pass. I slid through and caught my sleeve and tore it. The rip sounded loud in the quiet. I laughed again, and it sounded like relief, and also like the kind of sound people make when they step into a house for the first time. I saw a light ahead, a porch light, yellow and round. I walked toward it. I rehearsed the words I would say. I was on a bus and it would not stop and I need to call someone. I rehearsed a softer version. I was on a bus. I got off early. Can I use your phone? I reached the porch, and the boards under my shoes made the friendly creak of wood that has been stood on. I raised my hand to knock. Behind me, the horn sounded. Very close, low and kind, and everything went still inside me. And my hand did not move, and the door in front of me did not open, and the porch light hummed the song of electricity trying. And the sound of the bus was not behind me now. It was in front of me. It was everywhere, gentle, patient, and very, very near.